What you write, bro?
I like MARE, man. MARE.
MARE?
Yeah.
M-E-A-R?
M-A-R-E.
M-A-R-E?
Yeah.
MARE.
MARE.
For me, getting involved with art was really not art per se, but graffiti writing and tagging. And when I was younger, it was all around me, but I never paid attention to it and noticed what was going on until one day I was with my brother and my stepdad at the infamous Writers' Corner in 9th Street Grants Concourse. And a lead train came with characters and cartoons. And naturally, as a kid, you gravitate towards colors and cartoons. And it just had me thinking, like, who did this, why, where, how, and I want to do it. And so I started noticing that the writing all over in the neighborhood. And then I said, okay, well, I can do this and try this. And did in school and got caught by a friend of mine who introduced me to a uni-wide. We're talking about 5th grade. And so my first personal creative expression was on the wall with a marker. It's an interesting process for me because it was one that came out of writing and studying with the masters of my generation and looking at some of the things they were trying to create. And mind you, I was the youngest amongst the giants of the game, being Kel, Case 2, Non-Part, Crash, all those folks. And being that I was a younger one, I had a lot to live up to, and in that regard, it was a challenge. So if anybody understands the nature of early graffiti, it was very competitive. So that competition really kind of had to force my hand as to how I was going to keep up with these guys. And one of the things that had happened by the mid-'80s, after the initial introduction to galleries, a lot of the artists who were showing at the time with City Janus and the downtown galleries, basically that moment was over. And I had to say, well, I can't come in with the same thing. And I was kind of a traditionalist, and I had to look at what it was that we were doing or alluding to, and it made sense to me because one day it all tied in, that it was movement and space, these not realized ideas of sculptural form. And for me, it was kind of like, okay, so this is how I, quote unquote, burn them. And this is how I pay homage to the culture, by pushing it forward in its formal way, but in a new format, right? And so it was driven both by competition and love. My role there is to bring meaningful and engaging art to Spanish Harlem in a gallery setting. And that this work should resonate with the community it lives in. It should inform, inspire, and engage, physically engage them. One of the first projects we did, which just recently launched during Comic-Con, was the DMC comic book project. DMC, of course, from Run DMC fame, decided to publish his own comic book called by his name, DMC. Urban superhero comic, great messaging. He wanted authentic graffiti into it, authentic language, and they hit me up and I said, bet, I can do this, I believe in this, and especially since it ties into literacy, which is great for young kids to start engaging in that, and positive self-image and stuff. When the opportunity came to bring it to the gallery, it was great because we showed the process of making this. So it just demystifies how this happens. So when kids come in, they're like, oh wow, this is how it happens. And it was quite amazing because when we brought some 60, 70 kids in, and DMC is such an inspiring person to hear, you start seeing them open up and say, hey, I draw comics, I love this stuff. Now, oh, this is how you do it. These are the steps, these are the collaborative steps, and these are the people involved. So it was great because there's an education component to that I really like. There's something into it, too, that ties it back to the history of the culture and hip hop. And the engagement with students is phenomenal because here DMC was in there talking to them, and then breaks out in a rhyme, and then the kids start soul clapping and stomping their feet, so it's really engaged. It's really enlightening and powerful. So to have a gallery space to do that, that's what, unlike on these other traditional galleries, this to me is kind of the path I've chosen as a curatorial director.